Hello everybody. So today I'm making a video I've been wanting to make for a while now, but I know whenever I talk about Bitcoin or whenever I talk about stocks related to Bitcoin, I get very few views, but that's okay. I think it's my integrity to talk about what I think are good investments for me, and just share my knowledge with all of you. So even though this is a heavily criticized stock, but I don't think people have done the research on this stock. That's why it's so heavily criticized. If you go on Twitter and you talk about MicroStrategy, you have just memes and jokes about margin calls and jokes against Saylor, jokes against the CEO of MicroStrategy, former CEO of MicroStrategy being a fraud. It's just very tough to watch, all of this noise. When I believe that this company, MicroStrategy, is actually a very sound investment. And I'll make my case, give me about 20-30 minutes and I'll make my case here. So before I make the case talking about MicroStrategy, I have a preface, right? There's a few things that I need to put out there. The first one is Bitcoin, so I'm a believer in Bitcoin if you watch the channel for a while. But I strongly believe that Bitcoin is best owned in a brain wallet, or what they call a dongle wallet, of kind of a digital wallet. So what I call a brain wallet is, you go to Best Buy, you buy something like a ledger or Trezor. Then as soon as you open up, you generate a seed phrase, right, or 12 or 24 words. You memorize these words in your brain, and once you have these words memorized, the money is yours. It belongs to you forever, and you are protected by the biggest network of computers in the world. In fact, if anybody wanted to hack that computer network, in a former video I calculated that it would be about $20 billion, and it would take about 7 years to build out the infrastructure to hack that network. And of course it's impossible because the computing power of Moore's law would keep going, and so obviously you would need to do all of that investments to hack. You would need to do it in like 2 weeks or a month, otherwise it's impossible. So Bitcoin, but that's a topic for a different video. Obviously, if you don't believe in Bitcoin whatsoever, you wouldn't watch this video. So that's all I wanted to say. MicroStrategy or Bitcoin ETF or GBTC can't replace any type of layer 1 Bitcoin ownership, such as a brain wallet. It can't replace just storing the money in your head, with your thoughts, with speech, storing the money through speech. You can't replace that. So, and you can replace that. Why? Because, for example, stocks are owned in street name most of the time, which means that you just have an IOU from your brokers. You actually don't own the stock. You have a broker telling you own the stock, but it's all dependent on the trust of a broker, right? You can only access your stocks depending on a well-oiled and functioning financial system. If you have a meltdown, sometimes stock markets can close when you have meltdowns. Now, we haven't had one of those in the US in a very long time, but that could happen. And, that's part of long-term planning. Bonds are like ultra long-term thinking. When I think about my bond alternatives, I think about me in my 80s, right? And all of the things that can happen within the next 50 years. That's what I think about, right? You can have a financial crisis that leads to markets to be closed. Stocks, they can be acquired by someone else. Like if you own a stock, you could have a bigger fish, a bigger company acquire it. You have leveraged buyouts sometimes where the CEO just takes it private, right? You could be diluted away by a crazy CEO who just prints shares. Stocks could be seized. Anything could be seized. Now, when you store money in your head, that's a different story. Stocks are quoted in US dollars, and you having something quoted in US dollars that can lead to impulsive decisions, because when you log into your portfolio, maybe one day there's a Black Monday type of crash, and your emotions get the better of you and you do an impulsive sell. So there's a bunch of issues that are avoided when you own Bitcoin as a bond alternative in your head, I even think it makes a lot of sense, to just generate the code and then destroy that flash drive, destroy that hard wallet, destroy it, just remember the code forever. And hopefully you don't even need to access it ever. But it's really, really powerful stuff. Bitcoin, I believe, is very powerful stuff. So that's my preface number one. And then you may ask, why am I talking about a bond alternative? Why am I talking about bonds? Well, because I don't believe in bonds. And, but it makes sense. On the surface, it makes sense that you would want to have a more commodity type of investment, an investment that will retain value over time, that is not linked to business risks, right? That's one of the main ideas behind bonds. Are just a form of savings, right? Just like saving the US dollar, but you can't really save the US dollar. And so a few people saw this series, but if you see off my series, 3 key asset classes, where I talk about the 3 broad asset classes. One of them is a good home with leverage on it, right? To beat the denominator, right? To really short the US dollar. That's why you would want to get a huge loan on a pretty nice house. So that's part number 1 of my asset planning view. Then the growth stock portfolio. That's what I talk the most about on this channel. And then the last one is, really bond alternatives, because really you can't do bonds today. I mean, that's my view. No investment advice, but my view is that bonds today, it's just a terrible idea, because you give up USD today, and you get your principal back usually in 30 years, right? If you take the most standard treasury, right, it's going to be, you get the money, the principal, you get it back in 30 years, and then you earn an absurdly low coupon every year. That's going to be based on manipulated interest rates and not based on the rate of increase in money, and you're just essentially locking in guaranteed losses, and you don't even know how big the losses are that you're locking in when you buy a bond, because the monetary stock may grow at a rate that is much faster than your coupon. So a bond, to me, that's locking in guaranteed losses. It's barely better than cash, maybe just a tad better than cash, but barely, because they're volatile, right? Remember 2022, bonds crashed quite a bit. So anyways, and this is the whole point, right? This is the premise of the channel, one of the first videos of the channel. I showed the denominator and the fact that dollars grow so fast that, yes, there will be dilution in the US dollar. You may remember my early videos on the channel. I show you Sears home from the 1910, 1920, Sears homes, beautiful homes, selling for $1,500, $1,100, homes that today would be $400,000, $500,000. Over 100 years, as Charlie Munger says, your only guarantee is that the currency goes to zero. Well, when you buy bonds or when you buy Bitcoin, your time horizon is you're saving for your 80s. That's what you do, right? So half a century is the time horizon. Well, I guess the currency is going to be more than halved, way more than halved actually, if we continue at this printing rate. It's not a guess. It's just the way it is. And if you look at, I estimate that it's going to be 15% per year of monetary inflation going forward. That's what you have to beat. That's the return that you have to beat just to keep your money. That's what I estimate. And then if I look at hidden debt, right? If I look at euro dollar right here, I may have been low balling this all along, because it's actually much more than that if you really think about it. Because I saw this from a very serious source recently, and there may be as much as $65 trillion of euro dollars out there. $65 trillion of hidden debt out there. I mean, that's just absolutely mind-boggling. So the fact that we don't know how many euro dollars are out there, and we don't know how quickly these get printed and these get back to the US to the US financial system, I think is extremely scary. And so we don't know by how much we are getting diluted. This is pretty scary stuff. So, and if you even go on, bonds are contracts. And so when you have a contract, you have counterparty risk. And that's something that you don't have when you own Bitcoin in your brain wallet. The risk is just you forgetting it. That's like the main risk. And if you get down that rabbit hole, you'll know there's plenty of ways that you can do so that you don't forget it. But that's the main risk, right? If that's a risk with yourself, if you have a brain wallet, just about every single overinvestment and the payoff of just about every single overinvestment is linked to someone else. Someone else has a say in the return of just about every single overinvestment, which is why I own mostly Bitcoin as a bond alternative. Most of my bond alternative that I have right here, as I explained in this video, is Bitcoin. So let me move on. So again, I do believe a brain wallet with Bitcoin, for me, that's what I do. That's what I do. That's what I think is the best bond alternative for me. But I think it's fine to have a few bond alternatives that have counterparty risk, right? It's a risk that you share with stocks. It's a risk that you share with owning your home. For example, if you store gold at a bank, or if you say you have a gold ETF, that's counterparty risk, right? If there's something like that, or if you store gold at your home, right? You have the risk that there's going to be some theft. You never know. There could be theft. Someone could steal your gold. That's not something that can happen with Bitcoin. If you have it in your brain, nobody's going to steal your brain. And then you have, other things. Like, for example, if you were to buy land, I haven't made any videos on this, but I think it may make sense to buy, agricultural land, very little tax, and just own it for 50 years. Just buy a forest and own it for 50 years. I think it may make sense. But you also have some risks here. You have risks such as local government, wants to build a high school or a train, and so then you have risk of expropriation. So these are counterparty risks that we all live daily with, and that we're fine with. And as long as you have some exposure to brain wallet Bitcoin, you're off the zero, right? You're off zero, such that if all counterparty risk fails, you still have Bitcoin in your mind. Anyways, very stunning stuff. But because I obviously don't have any problems owning stocks, right? And if you look at the Bitcoin world, like Bitcoin maxis, for example, they're very much anti-owning stocks. I don't have any problem owning stocks. I trust the system. I trust the system. I think stocks are fine. And therefore, since I don't see problems owning, most of my worth in stocks and real estate, I don't have any problem with that. Then obviously I wouldn't have problem owning a stock that owns Bitcoin. And the best way to think about a stock that owns Bitcoin is to go through the layers. So if you follow crypto a little bit, you may have heard of these layers, right? So you have the Bitcoin network, right? That's the settlement network. That's the most basic network. That's the layer one. That's how you can store money in your head. Then you have layer two, which is the Lightning network, which is a much faster network with close to no fees. But what happens is that you use smart contracts to do off-chain transactions, right? And then you have a third layer, which is the layer where you actually trust an app or trust some sort of a closed-loop app to transact Bitcoin. So, for example, if you buy Bitcoin on the Cash App, right, you have sort of this Bitcoin bank in the form of Cash App that guarantees you that you have Bitcoin and transfers Bitcoin. Layer 3, for example, was the main failure of companies like Voyager or Celsius. These companies failed because they were these layer 3s where you had to trust the company that you own Bitcoin. And then you have a fourth layer, which is you own an IOU for a stock, which whenever you own a stock, it's an IOU. It's a broker telling you own that stock. And then that stock owns Bitcoin directly in its treasury. That's a layer 4. So the way I think of MicroStrategy, I think of it as a layer 4. You're owning Bitcoin through stocks. So that's a lot of intermediaries. So how do you own Bitcoin like that? Well, there's no ETF. Right now, an ETF would be an example of that. If you had an ETF owning Bitcoin, you would have a security who then owns a commodity, but you don't have ETFs right now. Now there's GBTC, but there's a lot of issues with GBTC, discount issues, and then the company that's running GBTC, DCG, there's been a few things that may make people concerned about GBTC. Plus the fact that the SEC keeps denying the ETF to GBTC, I think, and GBTC is expensive. That's another one. Anyways, so there's plenty of reasons why I don't like GBTC too much. But then we have MicroStrategy. MicroStrategy is an entirely different story. It is a complex stock, but it is a stock that I believe has a tremendous potential for exposure to Bitcoin. And, I want to get started with the video now and tell you all about MicroStrategy. So let's get started. MicroStrategy very recently in May, June-ish of 2020, bought Bitcoin and divided itself into two entities, or one entity with two corporate strategy. And so they had the legacy business. Their legacy business is they are a business intelligence software, i.e., they provide dashboards to branch managers, to retail store managers, to CEOs, to higher level, lower level managers. They're in the dashboard business. They were one of the very first companies to do that. They've had a software license business for the longest time, and they've been around for ever since the 90s. Stable, low growth business. And then come the spring of 2020, MicroStrategy decides to convert its cash to Bitcoin. And that makes tremendous news. And they make a huge purchase of more than $100 million of Bitcoin at $10,000. And that propels them into the news and into this new strategy. And then Michael Saylor, CEO of MicroStrategy at the time, becomes an evangelist for Bitcoin and has this epiphany about Bitcoin. And that's the Bitcoin strategy. So in this video, I want to go through first the business intelligence strategy, and second, the Bitcoin strategy. And the reason why I called this video margin of safety, why we're investing with a margin of safety here, is because the business intelligence software company is, it's not a company I would ever buy, but it's not that bad. I mean, frankly, it's a value stock. It's a stable stock, just like any other value stock that would be included in a broad index. So I just want to go through first the business intelligence business of MicroStrategy. So let's talk about their business. For the purposes of this video, what we really care of this investment, what we really care about this investment is the fact that MicroStrategy has clearly outlined that they will take the cash flows from the business intelligence strategy from their software business. They will take those cash flows and pour them into Bitcoin as they come in. So as the years go by, the cash flows of the BI business flow into Bitcoin. Therefore, when I analyze the business, I care about the cash flows. That's what I care the most about. So let me go back over the past 10 years. And, this is a slow growth business with ups and downs and versions of the product, new versions, old versions, etc. Really, really mature business. The business is more than 25 years old, I believe. So really mature business. And so I look at the cash flow from operations. Keep in mind that the balance sheet is a mess after 2020 because of Bitcoin and because of Bitcoin accounting, and we're going to get into that. But I look at the cash flow and I see that they have a $64 million a year on average for the past 10 years on their cash flow, $64 million a year. Now, we also need to forget about the current present day valuation, because the price of Bitcoin has shot up for much of the Bitcoin that they purchased. Therefore, we need to forget about that for a second and just look at the market cap prior to the Bitcoin strategy. Their market cap used to be about 1.5 billion. Like take plus or minus 250 million. That was the market cap of MicroStrategy for roughly 10 years. So, really your standard stock that I would not buy if there was no Bitcoin attached to it. And they were trading at about 23 times cash flows, which would make a PE lower than that. Typically, cash flows, of course, are higher than earnings. So really, probably trading in line, maybe a little bit of a premium to the S&P 500 because it's a software stock and therefore it's a better business, right? Higher margins. So you're not getting a bad business per se when you buy MicroStrategy. You're just getting a slow growth, steady Eddie software business with a little bit higher than average margins, but also higher than average competition. As we'll see, they have a lot of competition. So it's just a kind of a stagnant value software stock, but that still generates cash flow. That is still generates cash flow, and it didn't have some insane valuation, just kind of your standard software stock, maybe a little overvalued, but not that much, really not that much. So that's the business in terms of finance, right? Of how much cash flow they make. Now, what is the product of MicroStrategy? What do they do, right? What do they do? Well, they do business intelligence software, most specifically focusing on gathering the data, analyzing the data, and putting the data into dashboards, right? So if you think of businesses like Tableau, that's pretty much the competitor here. And they are very good in certain industries. Like they're great at hospital dashboards and healthcare dashboards in general, and they're great at retail dashboards. Like this is an example of a retail store, like a retail company. You would see how many online orders you got, how many in-store orders you got, how many call centers, and you would see like the customer lifetime. You can see how a middle-level manager, or even a higher-level manager, if you're a medium-sized business, you can see how that could be useful to have this dashboard. So they build these dashboards. Their software license builds dashboard for specific industries. This is another dashboard, for example. This is for branch manager. So you would build a dashboard for the branch where you can see your clients, the deposits, the target, everything that's going on, employee performance, all of the employees from the branch. So that would be for, say, a branch manager, awards, all of that kind of stuff. So they have the dashboard business, right? Software intelligence business. Who are the competitors of MicroStrategy? Well, let's talk a little bit about those, because first of all, Michael Saylor says, many of their competitors that they've seen over the years have gotten acquired by big techs, such that today they are the last independent, comprehensive business intelligence platform left, because all of them kind of got acquired by big tech. And so when you go on their website, you can see that they're the last company standing against Microsoft. Microsoft has their business intelligence division called Power BI. So MicroStrategy competes against Microsoft in business intelligence. They compete against Tableau in business intelligence. So Tableau belongs to Salesforce now, and they compete against SAP with business objects in business intelligence. So they compete against pretty massive firms, and their competitive advantage, their moat in that business is really that they're more of a niche player. Like I said, like they're really good at banking, they're good at government, they're good at retail. So they're kind of a niche, and they do pretty well within their niche. It's like they're within kind of a niche players. They're kind of on top, right? Aside from Google, they're kind of on top within their niche player right here. So they do pretty well within their niche. They have a few selling points, quite frankly, right now. Is you have a trend where a lot of companies try to reduce their dependence on big tech, because they probably already send too much money to Microsoft and Salesforce, and so they're like, well, let me see if we can reduce our dependence on these big companies, and so that's a big selling point. They're also lower cost than, say, a Tableau, or than, say, a Power BI, which runs on Azure and runs up the bills of Microsoft cloud service Azure. And they also have a focus on ease of use and low-code, no-code interface, which is also a trend right now. It's a trend of coding right now. So I would say, not a bad business, not a great growth business, but a cash flowing business. And that's what I care for this bond investment, is I care that it's a cash flowing business that is going to at least retain some level of cash flow. Like I said, would I buy without the BTC strategy? Would I buy MicroStrategy without the Bitcoin strategy? No, absolutely not. I would not be interested. I would not even cover a stock. So slow growing business, and I think it will grow at the rate of the economy. Like all mature businesses, it will grow at the rate of the economy. And another important point before I move to Bitcoin, when we talk about the revenue of MicroStrategy, it's important to realize, like most older software companies, what they're doing is they're transitioning to the cloud, right? It's just like you don't buy a Microsoft Office license anymore today. You just do Microsoft Office 365 and you pay, I don't know, $7-8 a month. Well, they're doing the same thing to their business, where they used to sell licenses, and now they're shifting away the license business into the subscription revenue business, which is the cloud business. So you can expect that these number of the old license business will go down over time, and that the subscription cloud business will go up over time as they're going through this transition. And this is really short-term pain for long-term gain. So you're losing license sales right now, but in the long run, you'll have recurring revenue. So you're exchanging lower quality one-time income or one-time sale every time you got to sell a license, and you're replacing that with recurring income. It's a classic of our era, a classic trend for software companies today is moving away from license and moving into the cloud. And so that's why you have these transitional revenues. Last thing I'll say is because they're a business intelligence company, they are at the forefront of artificial intelligence and machine learning through recommender systems. So this is corollary to what you'll find with some of what Palantir does and Snowflake does. You need to recommend things when you do business intelligence, right? The dashboard can recommend things, and we're getting into AI ML. So we just need to keep in mind that this is a tailwind for the stock, and it's definitely a tailwind. So now that I've covered the stock, so like I said, slow growing, grows at the rate of the economy. I think they have a niche. They have a little bit of a competitive advantage. Not getting crushed anytime soon. But again, nothing too crazy, nothing too exciting. Like it's not a Snowflake, it's not a Datadog, it's not a CrowdStrike, it's not a stock I would buy without Bitcoin. Let's now talk about their Bitcoin strategy. Their Bitcoin strategy is to be the largest publicly traded corporate holder of Bitcoin. That is what they are aiming for. They want to accumulate more Bitcoin. And so, that's why some of the Bitcoiners write things like, oh, will Michael Saylor become the first trillionaire? Stupid thumbnails like that. That's because of the crazy bet that he's taking on Bitcoin. He's doing a great bet on Bitcoin. And when you buy the company, you have a margin of safety of the business I just described. And then you also have the Bitcoin business. So let's just talk about the Bitcoin business. So this is the Bitcoin carrying value versus the market. That's how much Bitcoin they have. And you can see that they have 3.127 billion Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Now, the carrying value is 1.84 billion. Do you find that fishy? And let me move on to the next slide, and you'll see why. Look at a few things. And let's start with income. You can see that income right here is way negative. They lost $1.5 billion. So the market is crazy punishing the stock. What is going on? They lost $1.5 billion. Well, they didn't lose $1.5 billion. This is the accounting standards that only allows them to mark down an investment. So MicroStrategy is only allowed to mark down Bitcoin and mark down the carrying value as a loss forever. So you can see Bitcoin goes back up. Like Bitcoin went back up, $1.3, $1.4 billion. Like Bitcoin just went back up. They're not going to be able to mark it up. That's the silliness of GAAP accounting. GAAP accounting is crazy. That's why trading on price to earnings ratio or trading on GAAP accounting is crazy, because obviously that Bitcoin is worth 3.1 million and not 1.8 million. But people who don't dig enough in the stock, they'll be like, oh, they lost 1.5 billion on a GAAP basis. Well, GAAP is fake, because the Bitcoin has a value, a market value of 3.1 million, but they can't mark it up. And that explains crazy issues like the fact, for example, in the example, the company is trading at 2.3, so let's call it 2.5 because it fluctuates all the time. They're trading at a market cap of $2.5 billion, and they have $3.1 billion on the balance sheet, and they have a software business that has been valued at $1.5 billion for the longest time. So this is a company who almost have twice as much in asset than what's it trading as. And even though the value of a company, the value of a stock is very tenuous, it's not a tenuous value, the value of Bitcoin. The value of Bitcoin is publicly traded. Like this is, like they could sell it. It's not right. Like Bitcoin can be acquired easily through factor markets. Like it's not like you have to go through some valuation process to value the Bitcoin. No, there is a spot price for Bitcoin. So you are buying, when you get MicroStrategy, you're buying Bitcoin at a very, very, very steep Bitcoin sometimes. And so if you go to like the website bitcointreasuries.org, you can see how big that gap sometimes is and really get Bitcoin for cheap compared to the carrying value. Not to mention that the company, of course, keeps adding Bitcoin to the balance sheet, right? They keep taking that cash flow and they keep adding it to the balance sheet. So again, that's a very, very interesting investment. One thing that I didn't mention earlier is Bitcoin, right? MicroStrategy invested in Bitcoin. That's why I put the here. Yeah. They invested in Bitcoin, and they're a business intelligence company, which I think is also very, very interesting. That a business intelligence company would start acquiring Bitcoin. And that's part of their strategy too, is that because they're into business intelligence, they are, having conferences, developing products to promote Bitcoin to higher level managers and to CEOs, which I think is a big part of that story here. But going back to what I was saying here, you are acquiring MicroStrategy. If you buy MicroStrategy, you are paying way less for that Bitcoin. So you're getting a huge discount on the Bitcoin, notwithstanding the fact that the whole company has a software business. Now, I know there is debt, and I will get into the debt in a second. I know there is debt. You can make them, there's debt, it's normal that it trades less because there's debt. Yeah, I know there is debt, but I will get to that in a second. Okay. This is, I think, a catalyst for MicroStrategy. There is a comment period right now. But FASB, which regulates GAAP accounting, is considering allowing treasuries, right, Bitcoin treasuries to be marked up, which would mark-to-market accounting they're considering, which would be much, much, much more logical, right? It'd be much logical that every quarter when Bitcoin goes up, they get to mark it up. If Bitcoin goes down, they get to mark it down. They don't get to do that right now. But when those changes occur and companies are able to mark up and mark down Bitcoin based on the holding value, you may get an entirely reverse pattern where you may see MicroStrategy one quarter declaring $2 billion in revenue, right? That's entirely possible. And then, that makes me wonder, what would the market think? What would the trading algorithms do? Like, would they be, would they be cunning enough to notice, right? Because they clearly think this is a huge loss. Like how many people actually dig deeper, right? I believe it's a big anomaly in the market right now. This company should not be trading at like almost 1 billion under the holding value and then give no value to the software business, which is not a sinking business. It's just a flat business that has a value because of its cash flows. So let me get to the debt. And I'll conclude a little bit with the debt here. So I believe they have a very solid capital structure. Keep in mind that the Bitcoin halving, when the supply of Bitcoin gets divided by 2, that Bitcoin halving is in should be about April 2024. So the supply of new Bitcoin will be reduced in half by April of 2024, which every time that has happened, Bitcoin goes up in value because, of course, trading happens at the edge. And who provides that edge? Who provides that new supply of Bitcoins for sale? It's the miners. And overnight, the miners get fewer Bitcoins, like half as many Bitcoins they get. So the Bitcoin supply gets halved, which usually leads to a spike in Bitcoin price. And that halving is either before or very much well before the maturity dates. In fact, the 500 million that they got in senior secured loans right here, that's after the second halving, Right? June 2028, that should be the second halving. So you can see this is the type of debt that they don't have to worry about. And by the way, Michael Saylor was really good at raising these funds at very, very, very low coupons. Like, look at these coupons, 6.12. You can't even get that for a mortgage right now, right? The timing was impeccable. That's a wonderful interest rate, and their Bitcoin collateralized loan, yeah, just a tad higher, but for corporate debt, that's really, really good. And they got that they got that with Silvergate Capital, which is a Bitcoin bank, because of course you would have never gotten these loans from a company that doesn't really look into it. And then what else they did, while people were very enthusiastic on Bitcoin, they raised convertible notes. Now, these notes obviously would convert, people, if Bitcoin actually shoots up, they're going to convert these notes. And that would be fine, and that would be okay. The owners of these notes are protected to a downside. That is, if Bitcoin fails, yeah, MicroStrategy is on the hook for it, and probably MicroStrategy goes bankrupt if Bitcoin fail, because of course they have 1.7 billion in debt in convertible notes, and who's going to convert if Bitcoin is like back to $5,000? But I obviously that is obviously not my thesis here. But you can see, because of that added layer of safety of a convertible note, they were able. I mean, this is stunning. Like, the issuance they issued at stunningly low interest rates, and this was a hallmark, by the way, of 2020, and early 2021, is many companies were able to raise debt at ridiculously tiny interest rates. And so the average interest rates of these loans of $2.4 billion, their average interest rate is 2.14%. I mean, how crazy is that? Like, who has an average interest rate, a value-weighted average interest rate of 2.14%, right? That is so cheap. I believe that was a very, very good move from MicroStrategy to do that. Of course, it's easy to be like, hey, stock going bankrupt, and to make a tweet and to make a thumbnail. But the fact is, 500 million of that is two halvings away. And, $1.9 billion is one halving away. So I believe the company will be fine. No investment advice, but that's my take here. That's amazing. And of course, they did one equity issuance of $1 billion, but that was accretive. That was highly accretive when they did it. So that's okay, right? You're not getting diluted because you're getting to buy Bitcoin. And in conclusion, and I'll conclude with this. What can we say about the performance of MicroStrategy right now? Well, we can say that it was a wonderful idea, right? The stock, since August 10 of 2020, the stock is up 117%. There's only one major stock, quote unquote major stock, or stock that's on everyone's mind, that did this performance actually just a tad more, and it's Tesla. Aside from Tesla, it's Tesla. So, and of course they didn't put Tesla in there because they're gonna be like, oh, we're not the best. But the strategy, I believe, has worked really, really well against big tech, which big tech has historically been a safe haven for a lot of investors, against the more traditional, like gold, bonds, silver, against the NASDAQ, which is a lot of the stocks that I focus on this channel, obviously against the S&P 500, and even against Bitcoin, because of leverage, because they have a little bit of leverage, and against their peers, right? CRM, Salesforce, SAP, Oracle. These are their peers / competitors. So the strategy has worked, and it is my belief that the strategy will keep working. I sleep well at night owning MicroStrategy. I really recommend, if you're interested in Bitcoin, I cannot stop recommending the What is Money series. It's a 24-hour series of interviews between Michael Saylor and Robert Breedlove, and discussions that they have, and you can really understand the fundamental reason why I like Bitcoin, and why MicroStrategy likes Bitcoin, and why Michael Saylor, founder of MicroStrategy, likes Bitcoin. So this was not investment advice at all. This is just entertainment. I hope you were entertained. I appreciate any like you give me, any subscribe I can get. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful day.